Now, the structural perspective, um, in comparison to, at the end you need to compare those 3 or 4 perspectives: liberal perspectives, mercantilist perspective, then structural perspective. So at the end, you need to compare. Now, basically, structural perspectives are radical perspectives. It's different from liberal and mercantilist perspective, but some agreement between mercantilist and structural perspective. So what are the agreements? What do they agree? Structuralist and mercantilist. And how do liberals and structuralists, how do they differ on different issues? You need to think about that. And second, these structural perspectives within the IP discipline today is becoming minor, like a group of scholars. But still, in old theories, I don't know how much of relevance for today's IP. What you have to think about these structural perspectives is within the current IP structure. I mean, is it still worthwhile to, look at IP from this perspective? How much value? What's the value of, structural perspectives and looking at today's IP issues, right? And after you learn from this chapter, you will learn, those values, or why this theory is not relevant, or why it's still relevant, still, valuable. You need to think about that. First, I think the beginning, this chapter begins with some stories about, Venezuela, right? American intervention in Venezuela, why that sort of justifies perspectives like, these radical structural perspectives. Because, IP, international politics, is still so major power oriented, right? So structuralism began in the ideas of Karl Marx. He's the founder. Karl Marx is the founder in the late 19th century. So he founded structural radical perspective, IP perspectives. And although this classical structuralism in the age of Karl Marx, and today we have some scholars who do this, like a study, structuralist type of study. But old structuralism and today's structuralism, a little bit different, right? A little bit different. So today's structuralism exists in the form of maybe dependency theory. This is modern, contemporary type of structural theory, dependency theory. Even dependency theory is too old. Still contemporary, but even dependency theory that came out of Latin America in the 1960s and 70s, still very old, right? Still very old. But dependence theory is an offspring of, structuralism, old structuralism. And world systems theory, right? This is modern day, structural theory. World systems theory. Again, in the 70s. We'll get into that probably Tuesday. World systems theory. Then neo-imperialism. There are some scholars who define today's IP as neo-imperialism or neo-colonialism, right? Still, yeah, you can read about it still, even today. But very small number of particular journals that carry these articles, not mainstream journals. In mainstream journals, you cannot find those articles about neo-imperialism or neo-colonialism. Only small number of, those leftist journals. There are several in America and also in Europe. And in America, how many structural IP scholars? I don't know how many. I didn't count, but very small number. No, I'm pretty much sure no one at Harvard. Those big research schools in the U.S., no one at Harvard, no one at Princeton. Those particularly, private top schools, they hate them. They don't give jobs to these scholars. So these IPE, leftist scholars, they move around and usually they settle in public schools, public state schools, like at least one state has one or two public schools. So these public schools, you are likely to find those, not two, only one maybe, one per school. Anyway, they are becoming sort of a very rare sort of a type of scholars today. So today's structuralism, they have given up on this idea of socialist system, right? This is gone. But without socialism, then what binds them together, right? There is still something that binds them together, if not socialism, right? Basic assumption is this, right? Current IP system, current capitalist system is unfair and exploitative. And yeah, same. They look at the global system, but at the same time, domestic, internal mechanism of each capital system, right? Both. So internal capitalist system is unfair, so that global capitalist system is unfair and exploitative. Right? So they look at both internal, external exploitation connected. That's how they look at. But this is the assumption, right? They are not just scholars. The difference, the huge difference between structuralism or radical or leftist ideas and either liberal or mercantilism, the big difference, you know what the big difference is? The big difference is action. These structural scholars, for them, action is important. Action. So this is it. So this is their theory, right? Unfair global capitalist system. They study it, right? But they don't end with the studying. They act, right? Without acting, that's not a real scholar, real radical scholar. So study and act. That's the difference. That's probably the biggest difference. Practice is important. That's what Marx said, right? Action is important. So they believe that they can change this unfair system into something better, right? This is part of their theory. They have to change it, right? They have to study it, then go one step further, and they have to change it. Put it into action, right? Put their study into action. That's the biggest difference, right? You see, the structure you might want to think about the term, the structure. They would rather use global capitalist structure, right? Structure and system, the difference. Global capital system, global capitalist structure. Maybe structure, in the structure, maybe something more than the system, right? Structure, structurally unfair, right? This is something they want to use. Structurally unfair, right? The structure, this term, I think is important and intentional. They use it intentionally. So global capitalist system, they look at it as a structure, as a structure. Yeah.
But Marx came up with this idea, right, for structural capitalism, capitalist structure. But wasn't he more about equality instead of inequality?
Yeah, I mean, the structure may be inside the structure. There may be group of rich countries, group of poor countries, and inside capitalist system, group of wealthy people, group of poor people.
But wasn't Marx really against capitalism?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's the main target for him, the structural system. That must be, right, destructed, right? That must be dissolved, right? That'll come up. Yeah. So this global structure, this is important. That this is a, very smooth connection between internal system, external structure. This global capitalist structure shapes internal system, right? Economic, political, social structure is shaped by this global structure. Mutually, right? Mutually shaping each other. Right? Marx is dead, right? After the collapse of the Soviet system, Marx is dead and the socialist vision is dead, right? Then what comes, right? The argument is there must be still an alternative, right? Even without Marx, even without socialism, there must be something, right? Some alternative. That's what they're trying to sort of achieve. Right? So the argument here is they don't like, socialism is dead, but they still hate capitalism. Right? So third way, there must be a third way. In terms of method, analytical method, no single method of analysis. A unified set of policy recommendations. This is in comparison with liberal theories, particularly. Liberal theory, it has its uniquely designed method of analysis, right? So liberal theory is highly unified theory, right? Market theory is highly unified, highly quantitative theory, liberal theory. And liberal theory is highly deductive theory. Deductive theory. You know what deductive means, right? In terms of logical abstraction. Deductive meaning you begin with examples, right? No, you begin with conclusion, right? Then branch off into case. Wait a minute. Deduction, induction, right? There are two different. And liberal theory, what I'm saying is liberal theory is highly unified in the sense that they set a particular type of economic model, right? They set particular type of economic model, which is all time tested, time-tested, right? That's Western type of capitalist system. And they encourage every country to look alike, looking after this model. That's liberal type of logical abstraction, right? Which is highly unified, highly quantitative, no exception. Right? It's kind of a golden straitjacket type of theory, Western liberal theory. Instead, structural theory is very open, very open. So in terms of method of analysis, there is no set model. They're open, and they're open to different types of capitalist systems, different types of societies. There is no single best society. That's the difference. And they are more acceptable about different societies, right? In comparison to liberal theories, right? So I think this is exactly what this sentence means. There is no single method of analysis. Liberal theory, the opposite. Liberal theory. Structuralism has several functions. Structural theory is first a tool, okay, tool to study existing capitalist arrangements, okay? But also grounds for a critique, moral critique, okay? It's not scientific tool alone. It's kind of a moral critique, okay? Kind of attitude, philosophical attitude. At the same time, it's kind of a way of viewing IP from below, okay? Grassroots type of perspective. And they search for human freedom and action, practice. I think we should look at some tenets, some basic foundations of Marxist theory. Marxist theory, I think, begins with some historical perspectives. He was the first great scholar, right? He was the founder. And many of his theories are based on the conditions of the 19th century European capitalist system. First, I think in terms of theory of history, his theory is historical materialism. Historical materialism. And what this means is history is determined not by ideas, but by economic and technological forces. Economic and technological forces. This is material forces, not ideational forces. Which is different from his predecessors. Most scholars by that time, when they look at historical evolution, their explanation was, history evolves in a way that, one period replaced by another period, replaced by another period. what matters in each step of history for many different scholars before Karl Marx was some kind of ideas, ideology, religion. But he makes a contribution to the study of history by bringing in these non-ideational factors, economic and technological forces. From today's perspective, it's not, big, but from the perspective of those times, this is a very important contribution. And this is called historical materialism, right? Application of this today's international relations. The other way around today. Many IR scholars, we have had some new scholars who argue that stages of IR, evolution of IR, some scholars emphasize the role of ideas and ideology, religion, and that's how they become very famous, right? So that's the difference between today's, sort of intellectual sort of environment and the intellectual environment at that time. And he argues that historical materialism is like natural law, right? Very scientific law, and no exception. Here's the term, forces of production. We need to think about forces of production. What this means is that, just to cite from his book, he argues that hand mill gives you society with the feudal lord and the steam mill society with the industrial capitalist. In other words, each stage in history has its own unique technology, right? And economic system that is called forces of production. This is called forces of production. Each stage of history is defined by forces of production, right? So from the primitive society to agricultural society to feudal society, then capitalist society. This is how Karl Marx explained the stages of history, and different stage of history has different forces of production, right? Different technological, factor. His ultimate goal is to explain the capitalist stage. That's his ultimate goal, capitalist stage. What defines capitalist stage in terms of forces of production, right? In terms of technology. Right? That's his main goal. So primitive forces of production was this, right? This is primitive forces of production. We have to be careful. The current government, they hate these leftist people. The Korean current government, they hate them. So agricultural system, this type of technology. These are forces of production for agricultural society. Dialectical process. He discusses dialectical process. Okay? What this means is the change in technology determines the change in the social system. Change in technology determines change in the social system. Again, this is historical materialism. This is dialectical process. And through dialectical process, at the end of the day, what we're trying to get at is how we get to a crisis or a revolution. Because he thinks that the final stage of history for him is revolution, crisis. Capitalist system inevitably leads to a crisis and revolution. Why? Because of dialectical process. Dialectical process, and because of this. Right? A little bit ambiguous. This is a little bit ambiguous. Maybe next slide is better. But, yeah, here, we have it here. This is how revolution occurs in the capitalist system, through dialectical process. Social classes change. There's a gap. There's a gap in the speed, okay, between social classes change and technologies change. That's how revolution occurs. And this is dialectical process. In other words, social changes cannot catch up with technological change. Right? That's how people, sort of mess up with the system. And then we have a revolution. And human beings are important. Human beings are agents. Right? So these are causes of revolution. Revolution occurs. Conflict between the classes. Here we have the term classes. There are two classes, bourgeoisie, right, and proletariat. Right? Bourgeoisie, they are wealthy elites. And it's important to remember the difference between these two classes is whether or not they have the means of production, right? The means of production. The wealthy people own the means of production, and proletariat, they don't own the means of production, right? And Marx argues there are three objective laws that destroy capitalism. Right? From within, capitalism destroys from within, from internal forces. I suddenly become a Marxist theory. First, the first law. There's the law of falling rate of profits. These are interesting theories. The law of falling rates of profits. In the capitalist system, the profit rate inevitably declines. That's what Marx said. In the capitalist system, profit rates fall over time. This is law, according to him, no exception. All the capitalist system, they face this problem, profit rate falling. And let's get all three, then maybe explain each. Then there's the second law of disproportionality. This is second law, disproportionality. And this is put otherwise. How is this put otherwise? Law of disproportionality. This is also called underconsumption. Right. This is otherwise called the law of underconsumption. Disproportionality and underconsumption. Same thing. According to this theory, the law of disproportionality, what is important for this theory is oversupply of products. Right? Every capitalist system suffers over time oversupply problem. Demand falling and oversupply. Products are oversupplied. And that's how profits fall. Right? And Lenin later, he takes this theory one step further because of this nature of capitalist system, oversupply problem. They reach out and sort of, develop colonies overseas because of this internal capitalist contradiction, oversupply problem. They have to search for markets outside, overseas, because internally profits falling and products are oversupply and demand is falling internally. So they have to, develop colonies overseas. That's Lenin's theory. And that's why capitalism suffers fluctuations. There are boom period, bust period, booming and busting fluctuations because of this disproportionality. Then, the third final theory, the law of concentration. The law of concentration. So capitalism tends to create increasing inequality. Did you read about this? The law of concentration. Then these are all connected. These are all connected. Profits fall, underconsumption, oversupply. Then wealth is concentrated in the capitalist. These are all connected. And how does this work? As a combined theory. His explanation, I have not read The Capital, written by Karl Marx. I haven't read it. I don't know how many have read. I've never read it, but I just hear, read from different scholars who summarize, here and there. And according to this textbook, there is an interesting section why this occurs. This leads to, again, next explanation. Right. So wealth and ownership become concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. Okay. See, maybe it becomes clear when we discuss this, the definition of class. Definition of class and capital. Capital, same thing as means of production. Right? The definition is privately owned asset. Right? This is capital. Capital is used to produce the commodities, some commodities. And when someone has capital, okay? I mean the definition, class is determined. There are two classes, right? Bourgeoisie, proletariat. And what determines is the ownership of capital. Okay, ownership of capital. Those who own the capital called capitalists. Okay, not owned capital, they are called proletariat. class conflict. Why class conflict? I mean, there are two classes, it's okay, but according to Marx, these two classes inevitably they on a conflictual course, right? Why conflict? There is also theory, right? Because of this, two reasons. Sort of a relationship within capital between sort of a capitalist and proletariat, workers, employers. Inevitably, workers are exploited because they don't have negotiating power. Okay, they don't have capital, so they have to sell their ability to labor, right, to capitalists. This in and of itself makes them exploited. This is one reason. Second reason, more interesting. Second reason why class conflict occurs, more interesting. In a capitalist economy, there is always, right, some level of unemployment. 5% or 10% unemployment. So unemployment is natural in any capitalist system. But according to Marx, I believe that he really meant it in the book, in his book, or he really wrote it, because I'm not sure, I haven't read it, but I believe the author of this textbook, according to Karl Marx, this is intentional. Unemployment, which is natural to any capitalist system, according to Karl Marx, this is intentionally designed.
Why?
Yeah, let's see why. Unemployment is intentionally designed, and this is called artificial scarcity of capital. This is called artificial scarcity of capital. According to Karl Marx, it's more profitable for capitalists or companies to keep some capital out of use. The reason is to keep down the wages, salary for the employed people. So to keep down the wages for the employed people. And capitalist control over the state. This is also essential to Marxist theory. Here we need to compare mercantilist view on the state and Marxist view on the state. Okay, what they agree is they all think that state powers are real and present. Okay, state powers are important. So on this, both mercantilists, structuralists agree on this. Because liberals, they are different, right? Liberals, they don't think state powers are real. Okay? So mercantilists, structuralists, they think, right, the importance of state powers. But what they differ is this. Mercantilists, they see the state as an actor with its own interests. State is unitary actor. They have its own state interest. They define their own interests. Okay? They are voluntary, okay, in protecting their own interests. But structuralists see the state, the difference is the agent of capitalists. This is how capitalists control over the state. This is the difference. State is, they don't stand alone. Okay, they protect the interests of the particular class. There is collusion between the government, the state, and the capitalist class. Those who are disadvantaged are proletariat, working class. So society versus the state and business. This is kind of his thinking. The last one. So to summarize, these three sort of ideas are still central to modern day structuralism, right? First, class, then capitalist control over the state, then ideological manipulation. These three things. Ideological manipulation is control over people's minds, people's hearts and minds. Okay? So, most important goal of capitalist ideology is to give legitimacy to the capitalist system and to make workers to believe that capitalist system is legitimate. That's the most important goal. Okay? And this is ideological manipulation. And capitalist system manipulate ideology to maintain the system. Right? So, forced consciousness. This is how forced consciousness is derived. So forced consciousness is the belief in the legitimacy of capitalism by workers. Okay? So you need to break up this, right? Workers should unite and rise and unite to break up this forced consciousness, right, that was imposed by capitalist system, right? Government and capitalists. Okay, that's it for today. So Tuesday we'll get to second half of structural theory, modern day structural theory.